There should be the audio should be cleaner. I have a sock over this end. It's actually on the end of the phone camera, and yeah, you remove the mic and certain bleed throughs were still coming through. It should be a lot better now. This is going to be probably under 10 minutes. It's going to be like one topic, which leads into many others, and can take a while to explain. But everything that has to do with what is taking place and the projects, the unveiling or disclosure, which are similar ways to look at something. The topic, the idea of unveiling, and disclosure. Disclosure is kind of like the civil, social version of unveiling the truth or revealing the truth, and unveiling is a type of, it's kind of like a psychotronic, genetic, spiritual event that happens, it's like psychological unveiling as well, or actualization, self-actualization, we have a bunch of names for it. But it has to do more with the person's individual energy and them coming to a full awareness of what really is, what they are. Whereas disclosure is like when this civilization passes through this type of process in a larger scale so that the foundation for systems here can hopefully take a different route from there on. And so love heals. True, unconditional, not polarized, emotional or lust, pleasure, infatuation, anything like that. Focus on that. That's the only vibration that will overcome what is basically the destroyer programming, which is what more or less everyone is put through. So civilizations carry out ancestor so basically everything has to do with advanced technology. Like I was saying before, all the stuff with disclosure and basic is advanced technology, including what's applied against people. And higher dimensional physics, and basically it's the way things work and what's being used against us. They're completely beyond either the way we're supposed to or have been led to understand reality, or even the way we're supposed to as far as the conscious mind and how we naturally perceive stimuli and construct a view of reality, of physical existence, and in that way, temporal linearity in time. These it's almost like we're looking at everything as if it's a line and drawing our path through that, when it's actually a circle or an oval or a cone or something like that. And where everything looks straight and right angled to us here, it's actually rounded and cyclic in actuality. So we have a partial view. The idea is that the technology that's applied makes use of the world the way it really is. It's kind of like the subhumans, if you could look at it that way, in a world that is skewered and bent in a certain way with dimensions off. They appear to be normal. When you take the meaning of the world and put it back to where it should be, and write out the wrongs and straighten out the improperly warped areas or dimensions that are excuses for the way things are, and you put it the way things should be, when you see the way subhumans interact, or these subhuman like control systems for society, all of a sudden they become entirely crude, malevolent, manipulative, and mutated to a point where it looks like a monstrosity. When the energies are warped, they can basically blend in like people, and this kind of proverbially, but as well there's technology that makes it direct. And when our minds accept what's going on here as normal, there's like an effect in our minds and our perceptions that make what's horrifying look normal and seem okay. When you straighten those frequencies out in your mind and then the way you perceive reality, you can point out people who have these energies instantly. And I don't mean you can go online or something like that, but when one person comes to you, or when an aspect of this control system seeks to manipulate or in a way mutate your energies, you can spot that as the mutated energy and not this aspect of your involvement, or like basically what they're trying to convince you to do and become with your energy. That doesn't seem normal. It looks insane. And the whole point is, if you believe what they're saying is right, then the way you are naturally, that's wrong. Now it has to be switched around, has to be edited, modified, alternated with their version of who you should be. And when you can see things right, you can see it's not just somebody who's saying stuff and it's like that's what it is and you're pointing them out. When it happens to you and somebody is speaking to you and your energies are harmonized, you'll realize when somebody's impressing their own mind control system, that's all it is something's trying to get you to be a certain way, and it's a mind control system. If there's a business and you do this, you put money here or something and get a product, and somebody comes in and tweaks that system or, basically breaks it and manipulates it to get what he wants out of it, that's a scammer. So when people are communicating and they just so happen to accidentally try and get you to forget who you are and conform to their type of mentality, and it's an oppression system that they're wittingly or not extending onto you, that's mind control. That's how it works. There's no real excuses. And so the main point here is that the world that we see in this kind of like clean-cut, picturesque version of things, it is an illusion. And when we fill in what we're missing about our own energies and the environment, we can spot the sources of these manipulations and ultimately alien aspects of this world. And so it's all confusing, but eventually it'll make sense. It has to do with time and consciousness, the way everything is based on consciousness. Like consciousness can be influenced through media like television. You have a signal in your mind, signals can be flashed through your brain and mind externally flashed through the technology, the internet, or radio, TV, and can interface with your mind. You can literally be played like a video game by being coming through media, coming through electronics. Everything is consciousness based. Silk F, if you've seen some of her videos, this is stuff we learned in the bases as well as how it's being applied and tested. There's a layer of crystalline structure which functions like a liquid, electrical, or even like a stabilized gas solution or substrate that's covering everything, and it is when it's electrified, it transmits as if it's like a computational system, and so the whole land is turned into one big computer system. They can literally transmit energy. Say it's to transmit visual energy or radiation to those degrees at a specific area, activate it, basically scalar beam in energy to activate that area of this big worldwide net, and literally turn it into a camera anywhere in any environment. And then they can turn that into a portal system. They can turn that into a literally a makeshift radio transmitter, so that mind control thoughts come through it, or a voice, or whatever it is, like it's all so far beyond what we can imagine. The fairy tale world is like this world. They just don't tell anybody. And a lot of it is through technology, just also just how things operate. I'll try and cover a bit of that here. And it's literally, 10 minutes is going to be like 15, not more than 15, 20 minutes, because I don't really have anything else written down. And I've just been dragging on how this is complicated, but I'm trying to explain one thing here which will lead you to understand. So civilizations carry out ancestor simulations within advanced technology simulation systems that are a mix between organic and inorganic technology or life. That's the basis for what we have going on here. This is a false reality system generated by a hacker crew of pirates who uploaded a virus that is spreading or is spread by assimilating the consciousness of the individuals into AI units that deliver the viral load into other systems or units. Which means literally like that. Like there's a tribunal, a trial, you could call a cosmic court system or whatever you want to call it, and like that's how it's being handled. It's not listed. Like how would it be any other way? If the greatest destruction of all that is an accident, the only way you could really describe that or explain that with the beginning and the ends being corresponding to what's happening now is that if everything is an accident. It's a cop-out. It makes no sense. Only when people tell you everything's an accident can they then play off the lie that your entire enslavement and the trillions of dollars that way and the withheld technology and the accidental wars is all just like a whoops. No one in the universe actually expects you to believe that and still be considered a sentient organism. So, love heals. Focus on that. Alright, so you still have a duty if you've been through any programming, that's to basically any operatives, and you have to find out what that is, choosing who you'll assist, and in choosing, you will be forming your purpose. But it's already there. You know, everything is, the main thing is that everything is a simultaneity. It all already has happened. What you're going to do has already happened. And so what you end up with is the computational system are paradoxes when it is complexified or complicated by, say, bringing in information of what's going to happen into the now and then acting on that. Well, there's loops, there's just really strange things that tie together. I'm going to try and exemplify that. There's really only one to assist. You know, if you're going to assist through the liberation, you're assisting who's here or what's here. If you're assisting in the disruption, it's like a shadow mind, an echo of what is, and that's not, you're not really assisting anyone. Basically, this is an alien realm. It's not home. It's not the original. Nothing that takes place here actually operates on its own. It's 100% a Truman Show reality operated by non-human entities. Humans have begun to awaken. If there's no machines cookie cutting and picking people up and plopping them down and operating this reincarnation trap type system, then there's no reality here. That's how it works. You can't get it just without any other way, let alone on the physical level, let alone on these higher levels consisting of multiple dimensions in correspondence where there are interdimensional beings operating to like pull the puppet strings. And so it's a clever replication to look like home, meaning it's designed to imitate your original reality. Humanity was assimilated a few thousand to millions of years ago. That's the best way to put it, that we were tricked into accepting this place as the original and complete reality. If you know this, you're part of the wake-up call. A crew was sent in through a dimensional gateway with a limited temporal window to extract the humans from the system. This is a family or a team. The original essence of humanity was split up into a fragmented group or grouping, and these groups are then, or these fragments are then split up throughout the population. Humans were tricked. The humans here were tricked. However, there is no mistake. The people who are awake are supposed to be here to serve one purpose, and this is that no one person can serve, but a group, a collective effort, and just to liberate humanity and all innocent life. If instead of fear you find strength, instead of rage you find grace and courage, then you are one to assist in the liberation of humanity. The next phase is to activate the remaining light codes. These are levels of complexity to your own present awareness that require a deep physiological alteration of energy, meaning every cell, not one part of your body, not one brain region, not one thing or another, every cell simultaneously undergoes a frequency change. And so that's through your DNA. Which transfers the amount of light you can basically act as an emitter or generator or processor for the amount of information, and when that increases, the aspect of reality goes from like a narrow band to a wider band. You can actually, it's like inheriting more information, more power over the universe. There's actually a full, so this is the whole point of this video, and the one kind of confusing, backwards, parallel, simultaneity, paradoxical view of how things really work that I'm going to try and present. There's actually a full memory span of a reality where all possibilities have been activated by you, the observer. You are operating on a sliding scale of more or less of that full reality memory spectrum, and the more potential you unlock, then the more you instantly gain full memory of having that potential unlocked throughout all of the time, as if it was always like that. One way to look at that, and that's the idea, I'm going to try and explain here, one way to look at that is that you have amnesia. The more you realize this and uncover your memories, which could be seen as the unlocking of a full or cosmic memory spectrum, the more you become who you were in becoming who you are, and you realize and remember that that power, that identity, those memories were always with you the whole time, and they were just stitched right under the conscious layer of reality, but that's what you were really doing, and really that's who is really within you the whole time. That has to do with the hijacking, where people can, they get drawn into one of these lower, higher dimensionals, basically these like negative interdimensional beings. They basically take over the person forwards and backwards in time, and all of a sudden they go from being an amnesiac human who was like an angel to being an amnesiac human who then gets awakened as like a possessy demon person. And it's really weird, but the soul being returned, if there's protection from the higher levels, they can go and undo that. So the idea is that it's like you're amnesiac in what we see as creating who we are, accessing the potential, painting that picture out forwards in time. That's actually the opposite that's happening, and we're remembering who we are. We're unveiling that that's how it's always been. And it's very strange, but that's what it is. It's kind of like you have, a cone of some sort, and so we're at the very perimeter right here, where we seem to have a wider view of things. It's all very basic, but we have, from our perspective, the outside, the background meaning going up to the farthest point in we can conceive that makes sense to us here. It's as if what we always have is one of these views, one of these cones. It's like a sliding scale. This is where the fractal idea, the concept, and the fractal inflection also comes into play, because it's not never ending. There's an ultimate point of basically reaching a cosmic equilibrium, which we call it immortality or eternal existence. It's when your mind doesn't throw harmony off with your physical form to the point where there's an interplay where one must live and die, or sleep and wake, or any of that. It's just one complete harmonized existence. The idea is, say you're here, you have this amount of parameters or memories, and it goes down. And so the idea is that even if you were here and you have this little strip of the whole, the way you perceive that is going to be one of these. It's going to look like the whole thing. The skinny on the high end, and then it gets wider down at the bottom, and basically you perceive that as your scope of reality. So when you introduce more memory and understanding, what's going to happen is this anchor point is going to stay there, but it's going to expand. And this relative scale of the amount of information you have is going to expand. It's going to stay the same, but it's going to increase in the scope and relativity. This continues all the way until you get to a fulcrum or a singularity point from the beginning perspective, where it can't expand anymore without basically changing who it was down here, and where it is perceived that expanding any further would overlap certain parameters and throw off the distortion. When you get to that point, there's a type of maximal awakening, and your identity, that whatever describes you as an observer force, actually is remembered or realized as having existed for all of time, since the beginning of this universe and beyond that. The idea is, when that occurs, it's as if you have the story front and back of everything that has happened to you, and there's no gaps or spaces. When you uncover more memory, it is as if in between all the days or the spaces, there are extra days now that increase or add an incremental or a finite amount of information, but the overall changes at an exponential degree, where it's literally like you're adding universes. This occurs to the point where we have one complete universal memory at this spectrum, and you continue increasing until you end up having, let's say, 2 complete universes worth of memory. The civilizations are split up on a scale of 7 of them, of complete universes, complete universal memories, and we have a slot, if you will, throughout all of them. What's happening now is we're expanding to get to access these other layers. When this occurs, it seems as if the main idea here, I didn't really explain it, it doesn't really have that like oomph when this happens directly to you, this like paradoxical re-remembering who you always were, and I don't know how to describe it, at least not right now. It's as if you walk into the creation of who you are by creating it, and it becomes who you were. We're expanding at a social level to the point where we're getting access to these other civilizations, which we came from. Because nothing starts just halfway through. Everything comes from that source, that which you could look at as a cone, or the pinnacle of it, and everything comes from there and extends downward. Nothing actually begins here. That's the other aspect of it, that we feel like we're going forwards, but we're going to the beginning, to gaining the memory of who we are. The more we go forwards and unveil what's going on, the more memory we gain backwards of who we are and who we've been. It's like an expansion in simultaneous directions. One or the other is a paradox. It's an illusion. It's just a cone, a cycle. Another idea is kind of if you have, it's all about the simultaneous now. How can you have an eternal now as well as having linear time? It's as if you're in a system that projects your consciousness out into the far future, and you're looking now at the choices you're going to make here and now and interacting through that, but do you exist primarily, or at least literally really, in the far, far future and as well the ancient past, like it's a loop. Imagine being observant here, and that's where you exist, and being projected down here like a tether, or like those artificial suns where you have a source in the back and it beams forward, reflects back to a reflective mirror, and then beams back out. If that's what you're doing from time, going back in time and then going forward to a projected future, a far future, it would be as if who you are now, say you're in the far future, is created by who you are when you're interacting with what you're changing, being projected back in the past. And so, in that way, the things that you do to change who you are now in the far future, it's really confusing, that changes you in the far future and is based upon the changes that are taking place in the past, are actually simultaneously happening to lead you into becoming the person in the far future that goes back and makes those changes in the past that leads you back to the future. It's the strangest thing, but that's how everything is actually taking place. I really didn't do anything to explain anything here, but all the technology is based upon that. If there's something you want to control, you basically draw up the blueprint of the conscious pathway of interacting with that information in a way that yields more control over it. And that is literally born into reality and becomes part of the experiment, or the experience here, the physical reality. That kind of sums it up. That to create something physically, imagine yourself going to the far future with the concept and sending yourself back to the past to create it, and going back to the far future to realize it. And you'll create a weird hyperdimensional loop in your mind, and it brings it into manifest, more or less. The idea is, imagine having technology that can control this to the point where you're literally using a device like a telescope, but looking into time. And even a microscope of looking down into microcosmic moments, and finding in between thoughts when you look in with the device. And you know you only had two thoughts in the past, 2 seconds. But you look at that device in, and you see little streams of thoughts making up those spaces in between those thoughts. And you look at those, and you look in, and there's extra thoughts in between those. And it goes on for layers, but there's a specific amount, usually seven layers. And for instance, if you go like 10, 20 layers off to the side, it's like you're going to get random noise that you might think is you thinking, but it's the background radiation of the universe. It's the background. It's not actually there. It's confusion. It's not confusion. It's just when you look at that as the foreground. But you can still pull that into reality and make that the foreground, and you get a whole crazy, weird alien reality. And that's the whole point. Those are simultaneously occurring parallels that aren't actually a part of your organic, what is known as the tree of life, your organic universal spectrum. And those beings, being hijackers here, are trying to convert this one into theirs, and right now we're basically in an alternate in-between, and what happens now is going to determine how everything plays out that's been happening. Yeah. I'll try and think of a better way to describe it. This stuff comes through in the strangest ways. I have to focus on something that happened and get an example because it's very difficult to explain otherwise. Basically, they're more or less like these polygonal higher dimensional shapes, and that type of higher dimensional physics where it's paradoxical, or like a hypercube folding, where it doesn't make sense to us physically. That's how everything is actually operating on a higher scale. And so in order to bring about changes here through mind from a higher scale, you use those higher dimensional physics, which completely have not, it's like they don't add up to regular physics, or physics doesn't seemingly add up to those physics, meaning what's actually controlling this universe is from outside of it, in the sense of the overall plan. But that also doesn't mean that everything in here is controlled from outside. It's just that the overall truth is beyond the scope of whatever you have in any given moment, and therefore it's extra dimensional or extra spatial, meaning it's extra dimensional. It's beyond one layer or another, and as soon as you get a specific scope, you're actually adding in more layers of what you're looking at. meaning you can't actually ever get the finite version of it. It just continues. However, you can get the blueprint for the finite version, and what you fill that blueprint in will change in any given universal stream, basically. Something Tanath from the Silver Legion said, and I don't mention people unless they've been confirmed and I basically met them on the other side. Or unless I'm letting you know, like to watch out for something. But they said how basically, now I'm losing the concept. Okay, so they said source. This universe doesn't have a source. The beings here, if they don't have the process for regenerative soul mechanics, basically, they have to become cannibalistic or vampiric in order to survive. That's what we found as well, which is why it's also partially a blame based situation. It's just for basically harmony and lashing out at vampires not only feeds them, but it's not going to produce anything helpful. But basically, that's what I was shown and told and shown. I mean, you can't miss them with the vampires. So, well, the non-humanoids, mutated ones, the subhumans, the hybrid chimeras, whatever you're looking at, plasma consciousness beings, whatever. And so, they literally created this reality, this universe, out of a bubble or a device that implodes space-time and creates a reality. This occurred at the beginning of our written civilization, our history. When time started being recorded, that was when they fired the device last time. And in the near future, it's going to be fired again, and that's why we're getting all these changes now. As well as it's the same event. Yeah, imagine, for instance, how it's cyclones. Okay, so you have beginning of time, 6-something thousand years ago, and you get this event. In actuality, it's this event, beginning of time, and then now 2017 or whatever it's going to be when it fires again. When we're going here and say CERN or whatever it is, hint, hint, fires it up again, instantly, and we end up up here, but on another layer, on another rung, going through the same process all over again. And this one is just the same as this one, but just on another harmonic, another scale. So that's what it is. And then you put a bunch of them together, and you get like one of those layers to the lasagna, flying rainbow lasagna thing, where it's like, there's like a feathered version of these that just continue and go, like nesting dolls. And so, Russian nesting dolls. And so that's how everything works, how everything is shaped. Like a series of funnels overlaid over one another to the point where you get to the end of the one, you kind of zap to another layer. Because it's not zapping to it, it's actually they're folded in within another one, as if it's kind of like, folded in this way, and then it's as well folded in this way. And they're literally like layered like that. But we perceive it from one physical universe as a straight line, then it cuts over into a straight line, cuts over, kind of like that or something. In reality, space is bent like this, and it's one of those like flappy things, but we perceive it as straight. We perceive the universe as straight. It's actually all convoluted and folded within itself like a big piece of cheese with holes in it, or something like that, or something flapping in the wind. It's hyperspace though, where the parameters, the variables required for the potential of the last actually are connected to the ones required for the potentials of the current one or the next, and they're actually in that sense one and the same. And it's like a flashing of lights, LEDs, Christmas light going through them, and we perceive it like that and that one and that one. It's actually all at once. They're all flashing at once, and we're just consecutively noticing one after the other, because there has to be a way to organize it. That's the brain. The brain is constructed to organize it in that way. It's also modified to chop out the relative information, the parts that basically like align and harmonize to create an overunity that allows us simultaneous access to the present and the whole. That's why when we get access to the whole, and the way things actually work, it's like it's a hypercube spinning on the screen in a way that is impossible for like a wooden cube to do or something. But that's all of reality. It doesn't make sense. The walls don't add up. It's like they merge with one another. They're reflected boundaries. But the idea that Tanath mentioned is that without source, two ideas, and I said both of these. Without source, one would resort to cannibalism, something like that. didn't mention this, but it's because this universe is created the alternate Rick and Morty multiverse or miniverse. It's literally, they figured out how to do it and they were like, alright, we can rule a universe. They didn't realize it was going to cut them off from the tree of life and be considered an act of war for all of time. But now they know. And so the idea is that, the other idea is that, and I mentioned this in the last release, it was one of the update situation ones. I believe 30 minutes goes by. Possibly the one true, sorry. But the source is not immediately like the goal to go back to source, and it's not also not what happens. It's the it's not the fragmented harmonics. And this in the past few. Yeah, okay, so it's the fragmented harmonics, bioemission, thought energy are the source of energy parasitism. That's the post. Where basically you got the pyramid, you got the one on top, and the source is the one true creator, the all. Then you got beings in the bottom, everything. The one down here who remembers himself or herself as, or herself or himself, as this, and goes down, well basically remembers going down and then coming back up, that's, you what can you say, you become the creator at that point. The idea is that to do that you have to align your will with that one, and to align your will with that one is at the very least, it means, well, you're for everyone, because you're not one in particular. So the beings who are most ego-driven, they're the least recognized as one of those, or least recognizing themselves as the omni-being. The beings who are, in a way, selfless, in the sense that they're truly for the one self, and they are basically assisting in the all, they recognize the most as that being, and the person who fully goes through life living like that in one continuous life data stream basically develops a self-referential reflection of the one true, but it's also a projection, meaning it's not mirrored, it's not imitated, it's the real thing. And it's like a son or a daughter, a child of the one true source. But the idea is that, one, the Big Bang is happening 2 nanoseconds ago since the beginning of the Big Bang. It'll happen until there's nothing else to happen. It's probably always going to happen. That's how it is. There's no before and after. It's all simultaneous. And so in the same sense, if your consciousness is doing one of these and one of those, then we're out here on this level. We're on the outer edge. And so to go 10 billion years ago or 16.4 or whatever it is, there's no limit. There's no like sun's cycles, it's just continuous, it's perspective more so. To go 1 trillion billion years ago is not to go back through time or space or to set up a recording device. It's to see this is your energy, one of these things, kind of like on all angles and inside and outside themselves, and it's to go up to here, to right after the Big Bang, or to go to the beginning. But the beginning is infinite amount of time away from the current, or any point of time. Just like the end of an infinite universe is infinite space away from any moment, including this moment or space. So wherever you go, you're infinite time away from the end, so there's no way to get to the beginning unless you go to the beginning of all. In that case, nothing has happened at all. And it's also, everything has already happened. It's a cycle. But, and as well, that time is right now. We're there at all times, just overlaid with what we're seeing in the outside. And, but in that sense, it's to go in through frequency to the beginning of you, which is, you're literally like a cone pointing out of this, a higher series of dimensional spaces and extending through a gradient. The beginning is right here, 2 inches that way up, like or in the center or summons point, whatever you want to look at it. Like that's the beginning, that's the Big Bang, that's the other side, that's the time, beginning of time, whatever you want to look at it as. And you go right to the end of it, and you can get up till everything that's ever existed. As soon as you go to the absolute center, you're no longer in anything that has happened or will happen, but are beyond and before and after all things. And so there's no it's either, one or the other, but the idea is it's all already there and already happened. In other words, go to the source to get to the ideas and the thoughts that are, or the perspective that is unadulterated and from the source, from the true creator, because everything going into induce mental states or mind control externally must swim up that cone and try and get to the source. You can, if you're the cone, if you're the center, well, you can always go further in. That's the whole point. And all the work that they've done, they'll have to double their efforts while all you're doing is remaining calm and refined to the point where it's these big electromagnetic wings on either end, and they grab the poles, and now they can dictate how you're going to flow and flutter. Well, if you go to the center of that, now you drop like 2 Gausses or Gauss or joules of energy required to differentiate between your decibels or vibrations or inches, degrees on a scale, like with the a level, like with the bubble in the water, or your iPhone if you use that. And so say like 10 degrees are required because your emotions fluctuate this much, or your mind, and there's that dense of a frequency. Well, they can see you're going this way, you're going that way. Now imagine you refine the scale to the point of a nanometer, and now how much would each end rise and fall if that's what your emotional center point was rested upon? It would literally be atoms worth of length that would move, that they'd have to refine their tools in order to sense what you're doing and control you. But when you're out here and it's very dense and easily understandable and controlled in an outward manner, then everything that fluctuates is easy to see. You don't need a microscope, you don't need a telescope, you don't need a magnifying glass or a refined electrical view. You can literally just look at it and see somebody's fluctuating and moving and push it with your hand, if you will. Somebody goes into the center, the point is shrinking is simply going into the center. You have a ruler, halfway of the ruler, that's the center point. Now you put stuff on it, you can move this way. Imagine you change the center point to 1 billion times within the edges of the previous center point. Okay, well, now to determine difference between weight, you wouldn't need to use that much weight. You could literally use a speck of lint and a speck of another lint over there, 2 lints, and it would the detection point would be that much more sensitive. So if that's you in your mind, by going into that center point, even if it's a disc, same thing. By going into the center point, it harmonizes everything to that much of a degree. So therefore, in order to detect your fluctuations, they'd have to harmonize and sensitize their materials, their methods, whatever it is, their beings, to detect it that much more. And as well, you being that much more sensitive are going to know when something else is externally influencing it. So the point is, that's the beginning of time up the center of the cone spiral. And that cone spiral is your time, is consciousness flowing out of a source, and that is your perception of time. And so I was trying to talk originally about so they don't have source, and their goal is to create source. Oh yeah, and so then the idea is that if you're finished and you're done and you become the one, well, that's what that means, that you're done with everything here personally. So it means that everything is over. Maybe this will help what I was trying to explain. So everything's over on that level. You can pick it up in other ways, but there's only one, so it means there's only one finished. But the idea then is that, the idea there is that it means that the whole return to source immediately thing, it's the same as saying, kill a person or something like that. So if they're telling you the mass goal of everyone at all times and everything is to become one with the source, it's literally like a drop going back in the ocean. Sure, there's a point to that, but it's more likely to say that people do it temporarily and return back, but to do that you need a method of going in and coming out. You need to have a stasis body, basically, or a civilization that uses stasis bodies where your soul can basically leave and your conscious fragment can go back to source and return. Right now we only get partial versions of that, and if people truly die, then they are gone for good, basically. It's a one-way universe, and it's supposed to be a collective, like a equilibrium, where you can do what you want. The basis, it's not a free will respecting universe for that reason. But, it is, but within the system they develop an overlay, this false overlay, because the whole K matrix is a false overlay that is extending from certain advanced technology here, and we're creating it. It doesn't actually technically exist, but as well, everything that we're experiencing here is within it. But as well, in that same sense, everything you're experiencing here is technically within your mind. Like, energy is free, existence is free, there's no battery. Existence doesn't go, and then eventually you get to the end, and it's like a little flashing like battery warning, or out of tape. Like, think about, how could you have, what runs out? What ran out? Well, energy, because there's not enough, right? And all of that things that exist, right? Well then, if everything that exists is finite and it ran out of energy, then what is on the outside of that barrier of energy? Well, clearly that means there's more there. So a barrier to contain and create a finite perception of all that is inherently indicates that there's more than all that is. It's the idea of an end in any sense in the cosmic view it doesn't make sense. It's like saying, I don't know, like you give birth by, it doesn't make sense, by going backwards in time. It's an inverted consciousness concept, and it doesn't relate to this universe, or in actuality. So the only thing there is a continuity, but in that sense, if you're running on a linear membrane, basically of recording, kind of like a computer memory, eventually if you add so much that it's no longer fractally overlaying over a specific finite blueprint of limited layers, then eventually you're going to add and add and add, and the original being that started is going to get swept away in unawareness. And so that's part of the fractal infection, where without a specific beginning or end, or without a containment system to prioritize, navigate, format the energy of experience into these universal blueprints like the Tree of Life, that eventually the original I, or one of them, any one of the I's that a person is, has to get wiped away or washed away by the sands of time, or the extra influence of information, the influx of information, and that's basically death. Holographic fractal infection is death by place, by reason of expanding through so many layers of fractal layers of information or iterations that the original one is kind of washed away and lost. But again, there's only one true original one, so it just means one person made the cone and went on, and then kept adding layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, and they kept having to zoom out by scale, zooming out. It's not that you go on the one, it's you do a specific set, and then this one pops and expands to 7 of those sets. And it pops, it doesn't go consecutively, you go by layers through a cosmic, continuous, exponential expansion of one into a multitude of simultaneous ones that are operating in unison to create an over-unity. By going one and then the other and then the other, that creates a repetition, a binary repetition, which never actually adds up to anything, because eventually the previous one will have to get overwritten to make concepts that are relative to the whole for the mind, because if you're using that method, you're using a binary mind, you're using a limited finite linear sense, and adding in a binary limited linear sense from 1 to 100,000, I guarantee you're only going to get 20 concepts in there. You know, okay, you're going to get a couple thousand, maybe a few dozen thousand. Imagine knowing 100,000, 100 million words. Even though our brains are so advanced, we can't do it. It wouldn't work. You know, look up the studies for it. So the idea is that you learn a specific series of languages, and then you learn the symbolism and the breakdown of phonetics and all of that, and then you can basically invent your own languages to merge with other bodies of information, and it expands fractally out from there. But it starts at a beginning and an end. The idea is if you started here and you went on and build 30 billion layers and you're lost, okay, that beginning still stays the same. You're supposed to go build a certain amount, and then that splits up into 7, and it just transitions into these scales. But it means that you go back to the beginning, and somewhere along the line there's repetition, and when you find a specific repetition set, you collapse them all down into, you know, layers of 9 or 7, and then it all collapses back down into that supreme 7 or 9 or 13 or whichever layers, because there's a bunch of different layers, and then you realize those were the only ones that were there. You were just reading a bunch of, you know, in between each layers, 30 extra layers per each one. But the idea means that it's just like a ruler or something you have, or a clock, you have the spaces in between. When you recalibrate according to those primary functions, everything calibrates or compresses back down. The numbers compress, they divide back down, if you will. And right now we're in a linear fractal infinitum, where it seems as if it just goes on and on and on. It's not. In between the primaries, extra space is being expanded, and it's all drawing out, and infinitely so. But when you focus enough, you'll see repetition. There is more repetition here than there is your ability to find the repetition, because it's dependent on your ability to create in the first place, and as a cosmic creator, the imitation isn't going to be able to create more than you. But they use memory wipes, and each day you have things that happen to you that they wipe from your memory. And if you could see it, one day would look like one entire lifetime to you. There's the same amount of information in every day that happens in one entire lifetime. And every day, a specific set of information is flip-flopped out and alternated, fragmented out of your view, and it creates the life to look like a series of finite connected days with life and a death at the beginning, where each day something happens different, but generally the same things happen in repetition. In actuality, the same things are happening each day, and each night, basically, the mind is wiped to exclude a certain specific alternating amount of information and frequency of information. It looks like an array of kaleidoscopic events in time. It's really all the same. And so the idea is then, the final idea, which maybe we'll explain 45 minutes, maybe we'll explain a bit about the source and how the fractal time and paradoxical simultaneity. If you finally finish everything and you finalize and you go back to become the one, the source, and the creator of all that is, you also realize that you are that now. And it's a simultaneity of being, meaning you're doing this and going all the way back, so that eventually you can either go backwards in time and pop to that, or you might even go forwards and hit an exponential expansion where you somehow lead back to the beginning. If you are to do that, it's not the same as saying you're going to, or it's not the same as experientially starting all over and doing it all over again, but it is the same as saying you will see how you were always at from the beginning, and it's a paradox. But that doesn't really explain it either. None of these really can be explained easily but basically, if you make a big joke, like a Klein bottle or something like that, a paradoxical geometric conceptual joke, a riddle, an illusion, that actually functionally operates or functions to explain, depict, describe reality. That's how it works. So I really don't know how. I'm gonna have to find out a way to describe it in a better viewpoint. But it's all happening now. Everything is simultaneously happening now, and the linear perspective is a kind of, it's like rolling down a hill only to roll back up it or something. It doesn't really make sense. Time, that's what doesn't make sense in that sense, in that way. Oh, so the last thing is that when our civilization is liberated, which has already happened, the people used to talking about it, guess what? They're already liberated. They don't have the same problems as the regular humans. And I guarantee you, the people that, yeah, they have those problems. If you still die, you have those problems. Guess what? The people that are talking about this don't die. It might look like they do, so they can basically retire, but that's not really how it works. When you, the point is, if you had the possibility, would you ever go back to source? Probably, yeah. If you are back there now and it's all simultaneity, what does it mean about the requirements of going back? Well, technically you're already there now. So what does it mean about a person in a physical body made to be like God in their requirements of leaving this place or continuity or ending or anything like that? The future civilization will be basically people who are immortal and can actively, consciously return to source for a limited time and return back to the physical plane. And every night make the trajectory of what takes countless lifetimes in this type of projective simulation or world. It's the same thing that we're in now. And that's because the form will be in a way that can transmit enough information to do this, as well as there are blocks that limit all this from happening right now, which is the main thing, that there are blocks. Genetically advanced technology, it's all frequency. That's another thing. So you have, when you have a simulation, you get as much stuff in it that processes the same amount of data as a person in their conscious mind, and you do something with the simulation, it's like a voodoo doll. It happens to them. You do something with the world, and the world simulation processes more than any one complete, like fractal contained point or group or nation or whatever it is in this world. Then what you do to the simulation bleeds out and echoes out in like a gravity of consciousness of data information processing into this world, like it's a big data processor. So you take a part of reality and you alter the frequencies a certain way, it goes into all of reality. It's like a pool of frequencies. So you alter yourself, you alter all of time, forwards and backs. It's a simultaneous paradox, and as well you alter the realm, because we're collectively inhabiting this place and generating changes through that. I'm just trying to narrow these down. These are like higher dimensional perspectives, just the basis for existence. That was this extreme ramble fest, if you can tell. This is what I'm used to talking about, And not so much anymore. I mean, I am, but I had to take a shift from, all right, they're doing weird stuff. Apparently they know about other stuff, and this is their plan to fix everything. It's like people are possessed by n-dimensional mutated forms. And then, the basis is that we're multidimensional beings that operate through extra-dimensional consciousness, and there's a continuous, that conical, flappy thing, expansion taking place, but it is all simultaneously happening right now, in the now. And in that sense, the beginning of what I was saying with you have your memories here, and you add to them, and all of a sudden you go from one layer where now, it's hard to describe, you have a specific life here, then you add to these memories, and that specific life becomes who you were before, as well as a new person, as if that was overlaid the whole time and you just didn't notice it. And you do the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing, until you get a entire universe worth of information in every layer of what was one layer before. And what seemingly was one identity before, you get multiple identities worth of information. It doesn't mean they're different people in the same sense. It just means it's that many universes or previous layers of information combined as one. The idea is they're all taking place simultaneously, and I really draw a blank to bring out the right words that kind of snap a person into understanding how it works. But all those layers are taking place right now. Here's the idea. You do this by re-remembering yourself and creating the layers as you add to it. This will help to explain. As you create the layer, you remember creating that layer from the beginning of time up here and entering that in as a blueprint. And you begin to create all the way until you create the beginning of time. That's basically how it works. It doesn't make any sense more than that. Thanks for listening. I'll try and figure out a better way to do it. But the idea is, if you're painting or something, and like you're finishing painting the room, and you end up painting the door that you walk in through, and then painting yourself walk through the door. Like, it's a paradox. It doesn't make sense how it works, but it operates backwards from that degree. And when you fully do that, you realize you are the creator. You're the one that does that for everyone. But again, that one is not out here giving a bunch of people a bunch of money or favoritism or whatever it is. No, that's the whole point. That one's selfless. So if you align your will with that, then you're basically moving up in the ranks of power. But again, the goal is not to dissolve your consciousness. It's the fact that it's already dissolved, if you will. But in the final rung of that is an immortal society that always was. And you find a human version of yourself that always existed and knows everything and is harmonized. And it's like it's the interesting part of things. All right. Thank you.